Somewhere in the mountains of Appalachia, there is a town where the company store still has merchandise on the shelves. There is a road that ends inside a mountain and comes out nowhere. There is a place where wild dogs took over the streets after every single resident fled, and the dogs had it longer than the people did. 15 towns, 15 stories, and at least 3 of them are going to make you stop and rewind to make sure you heard that right. Appalachia runs roughly 1,000 miles from southern New York down through Alabama, cutting through some of the most geologically ancient and economically complicated terrain in this country. Coal seams, timber ridges, narrow river hollows, and mountain communities that the outside world built when it needed something and abandoned the moment it did not. What got left behind is extraordinary. Not just ruins, whole towns, whole lives, frozen in place, swallowed by forest, sinking back into the mountains that made them. These are 15 of them. Number 15, Stonga, Virginia, Wise County. We start in Wise County, southwestern Virginia, just shy of the Kentucky border along Route 58, coal country. Mountains pressing in, hollow after hollow, mine tipples visible through the tree line. Stonga was built in 1900 by the Virginia Iron, Coal, and Coke Company. Uniform white clapboard houses in neat rows, a company store, a church, a school, a bathhouse. Over 1,000 people by 1920. By coalfield standards, almost comfortable. What makes Stonga unsettling today is not decay. It is the opposite of decay. The houses are still standing, the store is still there, the church is still there, the coal ran out, the company left, and the town just went quiet. No fire, no flood, no explosion. Everyone simply stepped out and never came back. Walk through Stonga today, and the stillness is the thing that gets you. Too intact to feel like a ruin. Too empty to feel like a town, somewhere in between. Number 14, Elverton, West Virginia, Fayette County. Fayette County, West Virginia keeps showing up on lists like this one. There is a reason for that. The New River Gorge swallowed communities as fast as the coal industry built them. Elverton is one of the ones it swallowed completely. Elverton, located along the gorge floor south of Fayetteville, Elverton ran as a coal camp from the early 1900s through the 1940s. Several hundred people lived here, worked here, raised children here. When the seams gave out and the economics stopped making sense, which in the New River Gorge usually happened at exactly the same moment, the company left. The forest moved in fast. The gorge does not give ground back slowly, it takes it back all. Today, Elverton is foundation stones under decades of undergrowth. Hikers on the right trails can find outlines of houses, a faint road depression, machinery oxidizing quietly in the leaf litter. If you did not know what you were looking at, you would walk right over it. Most people do. Number 13, Epworth, Georgia, Fannin County. Fannin County, Georgia is up near the Tennessee border in the Blue Ridge Mountains. Same boom and bust cycle as everywhere else on this list. Different mountain range, identical outcome. Epworth was platted in 1892 along the Toccoa River with every expectation of becoming a regional railroad hub. Investors came in, lots sold, a hotel went up, a church went up, families arrived and started building. Then the railroad chose a different route. I know. You have heard this one before, but Epworth's version is particularly stark because the town had already committed. The hotel was built, the families were there, and then the surveyors drew their line toward McKaysville, and the future quietly followed. Businesses left. Structures came down or fell down on their own. One church is still standing today. Small, white, in the trees along the Toccoa River. Somebody still cuts the grass. That detail, for reasons I cannot fully explain, is the saddest part of this entire story. Number 12, Beech Creek, Pennsylvania, Clinton County. Clinton County, Pennsylvania, northern edge of Appalachia, but the same economic fingerprints as everywhere else on this list. Timber, extraction, abandonment. Beech Creek started as a logging camp in the 1870s. Timber companies moved through north-central Pennsylvania like a slow fire, stripping old-growth forest from the ridges, hauling it out on narrow-gauge railroads that were themselves temporary. The camp grew into a community, a school, a few stores. Families put down roots the way people do when they are young, and the work is steady. The timber ran out. That sentence appears in more ghost town histories than any other in American local history. It never gets less bleak. The logging operation moved on and took its railroad with it. The community thinned and then stopped. What outlasted everything else was the cemetery. Small, maintained by nobody in particular. Headstones for families who lived and died in a place the timber industry decided was temporary. The forest grew back around them. It always does. Number 11, Wilder, Tennessee, Fentress County. Wilder, Tennessee is not a quiet ghost town story. Nothing about what happened here is quiet. Fentress County, Cumberland Plateau, 1932. The Tennessee Products Corporation cut wages during the Depression. Miners walked out. What followed was not a negotiation. The company brought in strikebreakers. The National Guard showed up. A union leader named Barney Graham was shot and killed on the road outside town in broad daylight. The men who shot him were never convicted. The company broke the strike. Wilder went back to work under worse conditions than it had walked out over. By mid-century, the coal was playing out anyway. Men died for that coal. Men were shot on that road for the right to earn a fair wage mining it, and then it just ran out, and none of it mattered to the company anymore. Barney Graham is buried in the cemetery here. The historical marker calls him a martyr. He was 34 years old. Number 10, Hard Shell, Kentucky, Leslie County. The name alone is worth stopping for. Hard Shell, Kentucky. Nobody named a town Hard Shell by accident. That is a name earned over generations. Leslie County, southeastern Kentucky, has some of the most rugged terrain in the entire Appalachian coalfields. Deep hollows, narrow creek beds, ridges that block cell signal and sunlight in roughly equal measure. Hard Shell sits off Cutchin Creek in the kind of geography that makes you understand why these communities develop their own, entirely self-contained cultures. Getting in and out was the project. Everything else came second. Coal kept Hard Shell alive through the first half of the 20th century. A post office, a school, a store. Enough. The coal thinned. The mine closed. The highway went through the valley floor instead of up the hollow. Same story as the railroad bypass. Different decade. Identical outcome. A few residents remain. Not enough to call it a community anymore. The post office is gone. The school is gone. The store is a memory. What remains is the name. Hard Shell earned. Number 9, Nuttleburg, West Virginia, Fayette County. And yes, Fayette County again. I told you, there is no road to Nuttleburg. The only way in is on foot, down more than 800 stairs cut into the wall of the New River Gorge. That alone tells you everything about what kind of place this was. John Nuttall staked his coal claim in terrain so vertical that conventional infrastructure made no sense. So, he built unconventional infrastructure, a massive iron tibble into the cliffside, and a conveyor system alongside it. Coal was loaded directly onto Chesapeake and Ohio Railroad cars, waiting at the gorge floor below. It worked. Families built lives down there, below the rim, cut off from everything above by sheer geology. By 1958, the seams ran thin. Families climbed those 800 stairs for the last time and did not come back. The iron tipple is still standing. The safety notices are still tacked to the walls exactly where they were the last day anyone worked here. Nobody came back to take them down. 60 years later, still there. If Nuttleburg alone got you, hit subscribe. We are only halfway through and it gets considerably stranger. Number 8. Dogtown, Virginia, Scott County. Okay, stay with me on this one. The name is not a metaphor. Dogtown, in far southwestern Virginia, was a small coal and farming community in the Powell Valley since the mid-1800s. Not large, not famous. A hollow community that survived on whatever work the mountains provided. When the last residents left in the mid-20th century, they could not take everything with them, including, apparently, the dogs. The dogs stayed. Strays and abandoned working dogs formed packs and took over the empty streets, yards, and porches. For years, Dogtown was literally that, a town of dogs. Packs ranged through the hollow, denning in abandoned structures, doing whatever dogs do when the humans leave and the property lines stop music mattering. The name predates the abandonment as if the place knew what it was going to become. Almost nothing remains today. But ask the right older residents in Scott County and they will tell you about driving past it as children, seeing the dogs in the road, and their parents not slowing down. Number 7. Radium, Virginia, Rockbridge County. In the early 1900s, radium was not a warning. It was a marketing strategy. Radium, Virginia, in Rockbridge County, was built around a mineral spring resort promoting the supposed health benefits of naturally occurring radioactive water. This was not unusual for the period. Radioactive water was fashionable. Radium, Virginia, leaned into it with particular commitment, naming the town directly after the element. Hotels, bathhouses, a railroad stop bringing guests in from Lexington and beyond. Genuine visitors. Genuine revenue. Built entirely on the premise that drinking slightly radioactive water would improve your health. Then the science caught up with the marketing. By the late 1920s, the medical community's position on radium had shifted from enthusiastic to horrified. The resort collapsed. The railroad stop closed. A town that had built its entire identity on a health claim that turned out to be the opposite of true had no identity left. The spring music is still there. I would not drink it. You should not drink it. An entire town killed by its own sales pitch. Somehow, that is the most Appalachian ending imaginable. Number 6. Bremo Bluff Canal District, Virginia, in Fluvanna County. Bremo Bluff sits on the James River, technically on the eastern edge of Appalachia's economic world, but deeply connected to it. The canal running through here was the artery that moved coal and goods out of the mountains and down to Richmond. At its peak in the 1840s and the 1850s, the James River and Kanawha Canal moved enormous volumes of freight through this corridor. The communities that grew up along it, Bremo Bluff included, were built entirely around that traffic. Then the railroad came through and did what railroads always do. It made the canal obsolete almost overnight. Freight moved to the tracks and canal traffic dried up. Lock tenders, boatmen, and merchants found themselves in a place the economy had quietly walked away from. What remains today is remarkable. Stone locks are partially intact. Channel remnants are filled with standing water. Engineering from the 1840s, still music holds its shape in the riverbank. A town built around water, partially reclaimed by water. There is something almost deliberate about it. Number 5. Jolo, West Virginia, in McDowell County. Not like the singer. McDowell County sits in extreme southern West Virginia, right on the Virginia border. A small number of people still live here, but what it was compared to what it is now makes it one of the most startling declines on this list. At its peak in the 1940s and the 1950s, McDowell County was the single highest coal-producing county in the music United States. Jolo existed entirely inside that economy. Company houses, company stores, mining families 3 generations deep. McDowell County today has roughly 18,000 residents. In 1950, it had over 100,000. That is not a misprint. Jolo sits inside that collapse. Businesses are gone. Structures are deteriorating. Roads are still there because roads are stubborn, but what they connect to has largely ceased to exist. Aid organizations that work in developing nations have compared conditions in McDowell County to the communities they serve overseas. In an American county in the 21st century, that is not a failure. That is evidence. Number 4. Canaan, West Virginia, Tucker County. Tucker County, West Virginia, in the Allegheny Highlands, is one of the most physically beautiful parts of the entire Appalachian chain, which makes what happened to Canaan particularly melancholy. Canaan was a timber town along the Blackwater River in the late 800s. It had a sawmill, company housing, and a few hundred people by the early 1900s. The timber ran out. That sentence again. I know. What separates Canaan from the standard timber ghost town story is what came next. A dam was built downstream on the Blackwater. The reservoir crept up the valley floor toward the old town site. Flooding, abandonment, and forest regrowth erased Canaan so completely it existed only in the memory of families who had lived there. In dry summers, when the reservoir drops, foundations emerge from the water. Stone walls, cellar walls, the ghost of a road disappearing into the shallows. The town surfacing just enough to remind you it is still down there. A town underwater is a specific kind of haunting. Canaan does it quietly, and it does it every summer. Number 3. Proctor, North Carolina, Swain County. You may have heard about the road to nowhere. If you have not, allow me. Proctor sits deep in the Hazel Creek Valley. It began with logging, then a lumber mill, and families who had been there long enough to bury 3 generations in the valley cemeteries. Real roots, real history. Then Fontana Dam was built during World War II. The Hazel Creek Valley was cleared, and over 200 families were displaced. The only road in was swallowed by the rising water of Fontana Lake. The government made a promise. A new road would be built so families could return to their cemeteries. That promise was made in 1943. They built 6 miles of road, then they stopped. At the end of those 6 miles, there is a tunnel cut straight into the mountain that comes out the other side going nowhere. A sign at the entrance reads, "Welcome to the road to nowhere." Below that, it says, "A broken promise." The government put up a sign acknowledging its own broken promise. I genuinely do not know whether that is accountability or the cruelest form of institutional indifference. Maybe both. Number 2. Addington, Virginia, Wise County. We are back in Wise County, which at this point you probably recognize as ground zero for the Virginia coalfield ghost town experience. Addington is the reason this list exists in some ways, because Addington is the kind of place that makes you stop and stand very still for a minute. The Addington coal camp was built in the early 1900s as a fully company-controlled community. Company houses climbed the hillside in the standard rows. A company school, a company church, and the company store, which is what we are here for. The Addington company store is still standing, When you walk inside, the shelves still have merchandise on them. Not museum reproductions, not stage displays. Actual goods, actual containers, actual inventory left exactly where they were the day the store closed for the final time. Price tags still on items, stock still arranged on shelves, the accounting ledgers that recorded which miners owed what amount in script debt are still there. The script system, if you do not know it, was exactly what it sounds like. The company paid wages in company-printed currency that could only be spent at the company store. You worked the mine, you received the tokens. Those tokens had no value anywhere else on Earth. There was no other store. There was no alternative. Every dollar you earned went directly back to the company that had paid it to you. The Addington store is that system made physical and left standing. It was preserved not by any historic agency, but simply by the fact that it was cheaper to leave it than to deal with it. That is the most coal company ending imaginable. Number 1. The abandoned district of Wheelwright, Kentucky in Floyd County. Number 1 on this list is not the most dramatic collapse. It is not the most violent history. It is not the most visually striking ruin. It is number 1 because of what it represents and because of how recently it happened. Wheelwright, Kentucky in Floyd County was built by Inland Steel in 1911 as a complete company town in the Big Sandy River watershed of eastern Kentucky. Unlike some of the rougher coal camps on this list, Wheelwright was built with a certain intentionality, with paved streets, a hospital, a movie theater, a golf course, and company housing designed to be genuinely livable by the standards of the era. Inland Steel wanted its workforce stable and present, and they built an environment designed to accomplish that. At its peak, roughly 500 people lived in Wheelwright. Miners and their families came from across eastern Kentucky and beyond. Children grew up in the shadow of the mine tipple and assumed, the way children do, that the world they were born into was permanent. Inland Steel sold its Kentucky coal operations in 1976. The new owners ran the operations through the early 1980s. By 1986, the economically viable coal was gone and the company made its decision. The mine closed, not gradually, not with a transition plan. The mine closed and the economic reason for Wheelwright to exist closed with it. The hospital closed, the movie theater closed, the golf course went unmaintained. The company houses, no longer owned by any company with an interest in maintaining them, began their slow deterioration. Young people left for Prestonsburg, Pikeville, and Lexington. Then their parents followed. Then the parents who had refused to follow eventually had no one left to stay for. What remains in Wheelwright today is one of the most complete pictures of post-coal Appalachian decline that exists anywhere in the region. The infrastructure is all still there. The streets are still paved. The houses are still standing, many of them. The physical bones of a functioning community are entirely intact. The community is not. You can walk the streets of Wheelwright today and see exactly what a town looks like in the decades after the reason for its existence has been removed. The theater where those children sat on Saturday afternoons is dark and deteriorating. The hospital where they were born is closed. The golf course where the mine managers played on Sunday mornings is overtaken by brush. Nobody blew it up. Nobody flooded it. Nobody made a single dramatic decision that ended Wheelwright. A corporation built it for a purpose, extracted what it came for, and left. And the people who had built their entire lives inside that corporate infrastructure were left to watch it come apart around them in slow motion. That is the most Appalachian story there is. Not the fire underground, not the flood, not the dynamite that failed to move the concrete. Just the quiet, grinding, decades-long aftermath of being somewhere that the economy decided it was finished with. Wheelwright is number 1 because it is still happening. 15 towns, 15 different versions of the same essential story. Appalachia built things, coal, timber, canals, railroads. And every time one of those things ended, a community paid the price that the company never did. There are hundreds more where these came from. Every hollow in Kentucky, every gorge in West Virginia, every ridgeline in southwestern Virginia has a version of this story somewhere in it. Drop the name of an abandoned Appalachian town in the comments that you think deserves its own video. If enough people ask for the same place, that is what we cover next. I'm Thomas. This is Lost U.S. Towns. Subscribe so you do not miss what is coming next because I promise you, it only gets stranger.